Yep.
My name is Wayne Arsney. I'm the mayor for the town of Emerson. You are standing here with me today in Fort Dufferin, one of the most unknown historic sites in Canada. This is the birthplace of the Northwest Mounted Police, 1874. The buildings you see around are the original buildings that are still left standing, and as you can see, they're in significantly poor shape. Our Heritage Group is now trying to restore these buildings and bring them back to life. The history of this site goes back, like I say, to 1874. Captain or Commissioner George Arthur French, with 350 men trained here in 1873 and left on that famous trek west, commissioned by John A. Macdonald, the Prime Minister of Canada, to bring law and order to Western Canada. This site was the training grounds and the only time in history that all the divisions A through F ever assembled in one particular place and then left on that venture west. The buildings you can see the white building is our latrine. That was the original three-hole Mountie toilet that has been restored. And next to it is, unrelated to the site, is just an ox cart that was basically used back in that period of time. The building right behind here is the officers' mess, which was then probably where the captain and all the other officers stayed in. And to my right is one of the original stables. There were two of them, and as you can see, the one on the right is in a state of collapse. And that is basically what will happen to the rest of these buildings unless we get significant funding either in donations and probably from the federal buildings. Behind us are what we call excavated sites. What you see here now for the trees were non-existent in 1874. The prairie fires basically started burning in Montana and Alberta, and they came roaring across the prairies, basically burning all the trees that you see. So these trees have all grown since 1874. So when the Mounties arrived in 1873, in order to stable the horses in the winter from freezing, they excavated long borrow pits, 4 feet deep, 24 feet wide by 40 feet long. They put willow branches on the sides to a peak, and then sod on top. And the horses actually went underground for the winter for the first year in order to survive. The men slept in army white tents with heaters, and believe it or not, they spent the winter here in 1873, training for that famous trek, July 8, 1874. When the wagon train left here in 1874, the stretch was 1.5 miles. So picture a red line of Mounties and red serge, with Commissioner French 1.5 miles away from the fort and the tail end still here. So it was a rather majestic scene, and little history is known on that. It's sort of been forgotten. There are some famous characters, I guess, that were original Mounties. Charles Dickens, the famous poet, his fifth son Francis was actually one of the first Mounties here in 1874. And also unknown is the youngest Mountie in existence, Thomas Bagley, who was only 15.5 years old when he enlisted with the Mounties here in 1874. And Commissioner French was worried about his age, but he was a friend of the family. He made him the bugler. So he had to blow reveille in the morning, and Commissioner French told him to stay at the back of the line so he wouldn't get shot. Of course, there was actually no guns shot in that famous trek west. The RCMP were very successful in bringing law and order to Western Canada and making friends with the Aboriginal peoples under Queen Victoria's reign. And of course, they're still in existence today. What else can I tell you?
Well, I understand there's a little bit of a site. There's some holes dug, and I was just curious about what the holes are. Now, of course, we won't go over there to look, but they look like they're dug in trenches, wide trenches. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Well, they excavated the dirt in order to get underground, in order to put those willow branches on the top to have enough height to get the horses, because a horse, of course, stands this high. They didn't have any building materials in which to make walls, because there were no trees. So the willows were very narrow and not very long, so basically by excavating they got the height they needed to get the horses underground. So once you went under, then you probably had about 8 to 10 feet of room with the willow branches on the sides and the sod on top. So there was enough there to get basically 150 horses.
That amazes me, and I've been over to the site, and it's quite unique. It's amazing me that there's no building materials. As you said, these trees weren't here before.
All these buildings are not made of any particular type of material of one kind, which means that the materials were basically used and components that were probably floated up by barge from Fargo or places like that. In 1874, there was no town of Emerson, so the Mounties had no lumber yards or Home Depots in which to buy the building materials. So in order to construct buildings, it was quite a challenge back then. This is also the original site of Captain Cameron of the International Boundary Commission, 1872. From this point is where the Canada-U.S. 49th parallel was basically started. He stood here with a sextant and using the stars triangulated the 49th parallel, which is 2 miles away from here. The border between Canada and the United States is all water until you hit Ontario, Manitoba border around Sprague, and then the land border basically follows all the way until you get to Vancouver Island. The southern portion of Vancouver Island, which is now Victoria, the 49th parallel, Victoria would be in the United States. So when they surveyed that in 1872, Canada and U.S. made an agreement. Canada would keep what is now Victoria, but they gave the U.S. an equal amount of land called the Northwest Angle, and that's right on the Lake of the Woods here, right on the eastern side of Manitoba. In order to get to the Northwest Angle, you have to go through Manitoba to get to this small piece of land in the middle of Lake of the Woods in Canada, and that's the reason why there's a piece of America in our country. There was a tit for tat. We'll keep Victoria, we'll give you this. Now, of course, U.S. is quite angry on that because Victoria is a lot better real estate than what they have on Lake of the Woods. But it all started here on this particular site, 1872.
So to understand it correctly, it was Charles Dickens' son, Francis, that came here to be a Mountie. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Now I understand there's another writer, and of course the town's name Emerson. Could you explain how that happened?
Well, the two entrepreneurs that formed Emerson came from Chicago. They read Ralph Waldo Emerson's books on all the successes in the harder you work, the more achievements you make. Ralph Waldo Emerson was kind of an extraordinary man and a deep thinker, and his ways are what inspired these two guys, Thomas Kearney and William Fairbanks. And our town is basically named after Ralph Waldo Emerson, even though he's never been here. We have had associations with his family. I follow Ralph Waldo's books, and I've also seen pictures of his cemetery at Sleepy Hollow in Stamford, Connecticut. Never been there.
So this site, and you also are in the process of redoing a graveyard that I found really fascinating. And this site is all accessible by the Trans-Canada Trail that you helped install and put in place here. But
Right.
Of course the trail is there. Is that correct?
I tried to bring the Trans-Canada Trail to connect what I call all our historic sites in Emerson, including the ones that people think are not significant. I don't know how many graveyards there are in Canada where the trail goes right through the middle of the graveyard. This is what I call one of the oldest graveyards in Manitoba, at least. It was started in 1872, same year that the people started to come here. It was abandoned in 1900 and basically grown over, and as you saw today when we walked through, a lot of the tombstones are still buried and hidden. The trail goes right through the middle. The walkers are basically becoming inspired by what they're seeing, and I think the souls of the people in there are quite happy to see the Trans-Canada Trail go by as well. Plus sites like that, and we're even going to be taking you further on here, past the lagoon. And I don't know how many trails are going to take you past the lagoon where most people think you're going to have to be holding your nose. We're going to show you that we've created a park next to a lagoon, and we're asking people to come and tour this lagoon to show that lagoons can be environmentally friendly and they're not smelly, and they're just a normal process that when you flush,
it's got to go
somewhere, and it's not dangerous to you, and it's not polluting Canada's waterways.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks for walking all these kilometers with me. We still got a few to go.
Oh, my feet are killing me.
Okay, take care.